Okay. Hello and welcome back, everyone. You're watching Grockit OGTV, the GMAT edition, like it says right there. You probably wouldn't have clicked to this if you didn't want that. My name is Jim Jacobson. Hopefully you're not disappointed by that either. I've been the one doing the broadcast of this, and we're going through the 12th edition to the Guide to the Test, or I am anyway, and hopefully you're following along as you're listening because this broadcast won't make a lot of sense otherwise. We are more than halfway through the sentence correction section, and the sentence correction section is the last one that we're going through in the book. Excuse me. And so we are in the home stretch. You are almost done with what is probably your first run, or maybe it's your second run, but if this is your first run through the official guide, I do actually recommend that you come back to this after you've done some other studying, maybe with some other sources. It's a fantastic way to ground yourself in what the makers of the test actually believe you need to know. Anyway, when we left off last time, we were on, I think we finished up page 671 with number 77. So now we're on page 672 with number 78. As always, I'll read the question to you, but it's not going to appear on the screen. That's what you need the book for. Fossils of the arm of a sloth found in Puerto Rico in 1991 and dated at 34 million years old made it the earliest known mammal of the Greater Antilles Islands. Okay, so, yes. So in the sentence as written, probably the biggest problem here is the root sentence. The basic sentence is fossils made it the earliest. Now, if the fossils were evidence that made a certain site the earliest known whatever in the Greater Antilles, that would have been okay. The thing is, it actually is supposed to refer back to sloth. Fossils made fossils the earliest, and so, of course, it, being singular, can't refer back to fossils. Also, they can't make themselves the earliest. It's the dating of those fossils that makes them the earliest mammals in the Greater Antilles Islands. So there's a problem with A. Let's see, fossils of the arm of a sloth that they found in Puerto Rico in 1991 has been dated at 34 million years old, thus making. Okay, so two problems with B. One is the comma that. Remember the word that, when it's used in the way that they're trying to use it in this particular question, that is restrictive. That is to say, I want a pie that tastes delicious. You wouldn't put a comma before that. That's restrictive. I want a pie, in particular, one that tastes delicious. That phrase is distinguishing it from all the other pies that do not taste so good. So in restrictive phrases do not have a comma before the word that. So that's that is an incorrect that. Also, it says the root sentence here is fossils has been dated, and you and I both know that you can't say fossils has. Fossils is plural, has is singular, so B is out. Choice C, fossils of the arm of a sloth that was found in Puerto Rico. So there we have the correct use of that. Found in Puerto Rico in 1991, was dated at 34. So there we have fossils was dated. And again, fossils was is naughty. Choice D, fossils of the arm of a sloth found in Puerto Rico in 1991 have been dated at 34 million years old, making the sloth the earliest known mammal on the Greater Antilles Islands. So that sounds plausible. Let's check E. Arm of a sloth which, found in Puerto Rico in 1991, was dated at 34 million years old, made the sloth. So this one has kind of a convoluted sentence structure. So we have fossils of a sloth which was dated, and by dated we mean given an age, not like somebody took it out to dinner, and fossils of a sloth which was dated at X date made the sloth. So this one has a problem. The fossils of the sloth don't really make the sloth the earliest, the fossils don't make the sloth the earliest mammal. It's the dating that makes it the earliest mammal. So choice E really kind of changes the meaning of the sentence. Choice D leaves it clear by having that last clause, making the sloth the earliest known mammal. Remember, the comma, well, really it's comma anything ing, can be used to summarize what everything that came before is doing. Thus producing or thus making, the word thus is kind of assumed. So choice D correctly makes it the dating that makes it the oldest mammal. So choice D for number 78. 672, number 79. Defense attorneys have occasionally argued that their clients' misconduct stemmed from a reaction to something ingested, but in attributing criminal or delinquent behavior to some food allergy, the perpetrators are in effect told that they are not responsible for their actions. Okay. So this is common GMAT trap, although usually this appears at the beginning of a sentence. We have a modifying phrase set off by a comma, and then the noun that it's modifying. In the sentence as written, though, so the underlined portion is the modifying phrase in attributing criminal or delinquent behavior to some food allergy. Okay, the noun that follows that comma needs to is what it's modifying. In this case, it's the perpetrators. Perpetrators are the ones who committed the crime, in case you are not familiar with the word. And it's not actually the perpetrators who are attributing criminal or delinquent behavior to some food allergy. It's actually the defense attorneys who are doing that, or the courts if they accept that excuse. So whatever it is, this modifying phrase needs to be reworded, because that's our underlined portion. It needs to be reworded so it's no longer saying that the perpetrators are doing the attributing. If we do a vertical scan of the answer choices, we can see that choices A, C, and E all start with in attributing, and which would then automatically, by default, modify the perpetrators, which we can't have. So they all have the in attributing. And that's why that's wrong. So we just have to get it down between B and D. Choice B says, if criminal or delinquent behavior is attributed to an allergy or some food, the perpetrators are in effect told that they are not responsible for their actions. That sounds okay. Choice D, if some food allergy is attributed as the cause of criminal or delinquent behavior, the perpetrators are in effect told that they are not responsible for their actions. So this one, basically, we can eliminate choice D on the basis of an incorrect idiom. Things are not attributed as. They are attributed to. So that's naughty. Choice B is our correct answer. 67280. A report by the American Academy for the Advancement of Science has concluded that much of the currently uncontrolled dioxins to which North Americans are exposed comes from the incineration of wastes. Okay. So much of the dioxins. There's a problem right there in choice A. Dioxins here has a plural, a plural form. If we were trying to talk about dioxin as a substance, much of the dioxin, like much of the oxygen in the atmosphere, or much of the water in that swimming pool, if we're talking about it as a substance which is uncountable, we use much. If we use a plural form of the verb, Oh, wow, plural form of the verb. Plural form of the noun, it's countable, and so we have many. And we need many of the dioxins in the correct answer. So any answer that has much is naughty. Choices A, B, and C all have much. So we can get rid of that. Those. Okay, so then we have a choice between D and E. The Academy for the Advancement of Science has concluded that many of the dioxins, this is choice D, many of the dioxins that are currently uncontrolled and North Americans are exposed to. So on that one, we probably would have expected the idiom that are X and that are Y. Also, it's kind of creating, it's giving two qualities to the dioxins that come from the incineration of wastes. That they are the ones that currently uncontrolled, and they're the ones that North Americans are exposed to. When really we're after the uncontrolled ones that Americans are exposed to. All the other answer choices have that. So choice D is a little suspect. What does choice E say? It says many of the currently uncontrolled dioxins to which North Americans are exposed come from the incineration of waste. So choice E is less wordy. It also has parallelism, or it doesn't need parallelism, whereas choice D, by breaking it down into two things that are X and that are Y, and then it leaves out this second word, that, choice D just changes the meaning of the sentence slightly and then doesn't even do it correctly. So choice E is our answer. 6, 7, 2, 8, 1. Recently, physicians have determined that stomach ulcers are not caused by stress, alcohol, or rich foods, but a bacterium that dwells in the mucous lining of the stomach. Okay, so a couple things here. The normal idiom for this is not by X, but by Y, where X and Y are several different things. In this particular case, X is a list of three things. Stress, alcohol, and rich foods, or rich foods. And we had a question like this way earlier in the series of broadcasts where it was three different things. And remember, or as the final conjunction in a list like this indicates that any one of these things would fulfill the condition. If if we had instead put and, it would only be by all three of these things combined that perhaps ulcers were caused. So we definitely are going to want to keep or. I don't know if that's going to do that to us in the answer choices, but it's one of those warning things that you can think of immediately when they give you a list. Blah 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 or blah. Worry or predict that one of the answer choices may change the or to and. It's much less likely to go from and to or. Most lists on the GMAT most lists in general that people give have and as the final thing. But when you see or, worry that they'll switch it back to and on you. And then we also have not by X but by Y. There's parallelism that we're looking for. Choice A does not have that final by. It says not caused by stress, alcohol, or rich foods, but a bacterium. We need it to be but by a bacterium. So so choice B, not caused by stress, alcohol, or rich foods, but are by. Now are is repeating the verb that's going with ulcers, are not caused. They are not caused by these three things, but are. And really, for true parallelism and for clarity, we would want caused to be restated because it's part of the verb. Are is really just a helping verb. Caused is the main verb. We would want caused to be in there too. Choice C, caused not by stress, alcohol, or rich foods, but by a bacterium. Okay, that's good. D, caused not by stress, alcohol, and rich foods. There's that and. And then it also is missing the word by at the end. And then E, caused not by stress, alcohol, and, there's and again, but are by. And so this one is missing caused. So pretty clear. Process of elimination gets us choice C. 6, 7, 2, 8, 2. According to a recent poll, owning and living in a freestanding house on its own land is still a goal of a majority of young adults, like that of earlier generations. Okay, and we've actually had this idiom before, although in a more condensed format. So we have a preposition X as it is preposition Y. So, for X as it is for Y, or 2X as it is 2Y. You see why I put preposition in there rather than the actual preposition, because the preposition actually doesn't matter. And the reason it's repeated is because, of course, parallelism. So when we are comparing two things and comparing two relationships, these prepositions here, as is kind of our equal sign, and it's necessary to show that they are the same, unlike words like. Unlike like. If we're actually going to use a new verb in here, we definitely, if we use as, we have to use a new verb. Okay, so the problem with, and then the other thing is in choice A alone, just that word that, like that of earlier generations. That what? Context suggests that it's aiming for goal, but it's not necessarily clear what that is doing in choice A. And then, like I said, or as I said, the like is a problem in A. Same thing with choice B, as that for earlier generations, when you're going to use that in this context, you're going to need a verb. Because as is a conjunction, a coordinating conjunction that joins another clause, which has its own subject and its own verb. And there's no verb in choice B. Choice C, just as earlier generations did, this one has as correctly, and it also has a verb, a subject and a verb for the clause following as, so that's good. The problem is the verb itself, namely did. We're not comparing what earlier generations did, we're comparing the goals of those respective generations, so it's a wrong comparison. It's not what we were trying to compare. Choice D, as have earlier generations. Again, this is a wrong comparison, but it is the correct usage of the word as. It's an inverted sentence structure, as have earlier generations, as opposed to as earlier generations have. But that's legal, grammatical, just not the right thing to compare. Choice E is our remaining choice, so it better be right, but what does it say? It's still a goal of the majority of young adults, as it was of earlier generations. So it is still a goal of majority of young adults, as it was of earlier generations. So it's got as used correctly. As has its own subject and verb. It refers clearly back to that goal, and we're comparing the correct things. Choice E. So last one on page 672 is number 8.3. In 2000, a mere 24 products accounted for half the increase in spending on prescription drugs, a phenomenon that is explained not just because of more expensive drugs, but by the fact that doctors are writing many more prescriptions for higher cost drugs. Okay, so the thing that jumps out at me is this explained because. um, or actually, it's got two problems. One is that it has explained because, not just because, but by. So it's not even parallel. Um, just to tip my hand a little bit here and show you what I'm thinking, explained because is not the right idiom. We need it to be explained by. Um, so, and not only do we need it to be explained by, we need it to be explained by twice because there's two different reasons why there's this why 24 products accounted for half the increase in spending. So we're giving two reasons in the underlined portion. Those two reasons should be parallel. So choice A, not parallel, and it also has because instead of by. That's an E. Choice B, a phenomenon that is explained not just by the fact that drugs are becoming more expensive, but also by the fact that doctors are writing many more prescriptions. Okay, so that one's parallel. We can keep that one. Choice C, a phenomenon occurring not just because of drugs that are becoming more expensive, but because of doctors having also written. So this one is parallel, and you can say occurring because of something. So that's not naughty that they didn't use explained by. You know, you can change the words as long as the meaning is the same. But having also written, the placement of also is off. You would normally have also outside of the verb. So or actually it would probably be right after but also because doctors have written. And so having makes choice D a little bit strange. Actually, drugs are becoming and doctors having written. I think that's actually not even parallel because are becoming is a progressive tense. Having written is a perfect passive participle. So we need it to be parallel, either because drugs having become more expensive and doctors having written, or drugs are becoming more expensive and doctors are writing. So it's not even parallel. So choice C, not good. Choice D, which occurred not just because drugs are becoming more expensive, but doctors are also writing. So that one's missing a second because for parallelism. And choice E, which occurred not just because of more expensive drugs, but because doctors have also written. So this one has the incorrect placement of also, which should be after but. Choice B is the only one that gets us where we needed to go and gives us parallelism. So because, occurring because versus explained by, there's a little bit of a difference in the meaning, but I would not characterize it as that's not the major reason to be worried about one answer choice over the other in this case. So, okay, choice B, on to page 673. Have I skipped any questions? No, I guess I'm just moving quickly. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Oh no, that's about right. Half done with the broadcast. Okay, page 673, question number 84. Often visible as smog, ozone is formed in the atmosphere from hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides. Two major pollutants emitted by automobiles react with sunlight. Let me read that again and see if I can make that not sound so awkward. Often visible as smog, ozone is formed in the atmosphere from hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides, two major pollutants emitted by automobiles, react with sunlight. Well, you can tell by the way I read it that there's a problem with the sentence as written, and that's that. So the sentence as written is, so we have ozone is formed. And then we say it's formed from hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides. We rename what we have a little apposition here. Remember that's this word apposition, where we rename a noun by, I guess I don't really need an S on the end of apposition. we rename one noun by a noun phrase that kind of explains more about it, and it's usually set off by commas. So we find out more about hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides, namely that they're two major pollutants emitted by automobiles. So ozone is formed from these two guys, and then react with sunlight. Ozone is formed and react. You can't really say ozone react with sunlight unless you're actually in a position to give commands directly to ozone. You, ozone, over there, react with sunlight. That form is unlikely. Giving commands like that. The imperative, sorry, I was trying to think of what the word for that voice was. The imperative is unlikely to appear on the GMAT at all. So clearly we have a verb issue here, and of course the react is not negotiable. That's in the not underlined portion. So ozone is formed. So we might need to say that ozone is known to react or something like that. Again, I'm just at the prediction phase, but we have a big problem with ozone being the subject, and then this word react, which is going to come up later. So choice A has big problems. Let's see what other answer choices do. So often visible, it's a short sentence, so I'm just going to read the whole thing with the underlined portion. Often visible as smog, ozone is formed in the atmosphere when hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides, two major pollutants emitted by automobiles, react with sunlight. Okay, so this really does change things for us, because what it does is we have ozone is formed when, and then when creates a whole new clause, and it gives us a new subject for the verb react. When hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides react, those are the subjects, and I'm just going to write chemicals. Ozone is formed when chemicals react. So that actually forms a complete sentence and gives us an appropriate subject for react, because ozone sure wasn't it. Plausible answer in B. Often visible as smog, really the often visible as smog, is always going to modify ozone. Ozone starts every answer choice. So that opening modifying phrase it's one of those rare instances of an opening modifying phrase being just fine on the GMAT with no concerns whatsoever. So often visible as smog, ozone is formed in the atmosphere, and when hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides, two major pollutants emitted by automobiles, react with sunlight. So it's formed in the atmosphere, and when those chemicals react. So it's formed in the atmosphere. The problems here, number one, these two verbs aren't parallel, because we would want to say perhaps that ozone is formed when this happens and when this happens. So choice C lacks parallelism. The other possibility is that if we wanted to say ozone is formed in the atmosphere, and when chemicals react react with sunlight, this other thing happens. So this when clause could be setting up it could have its own consequence, but that's lacking, that we don't have more of the sentence to say what happens when these chemicals react with sunlight. So the two possible interpretations of this and when conjunction here, neither of them works. It's neither parallel to what came before nor setting up some consequence that came later, so choice C doesn't help us. D, often visible as smog, ozone formed in the atmosphere when hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides, two major pollutants emitted by automobiles, react with sunlight. So here we're actually missing, let's see, ozone formed when those things react with sunlight. We're missing a main verb for ozone. So the sentence here is formed in atmo when blah blah blah, we never actually get to a main verb for what ozone is doing. Because everything else is just one big apposition phrase. Ozone formed in the atmosphere when hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides, which are in turn two major pollutants emitted by automobiles, when those react with sunlight, so ozone is formed. But we still don't have a main verb for ozone now, which is a problem. Choice D, not even a complete sentence. And then choice E, ozone formed in the atmosphere from hydrocarbons and nitrogen oxides. Then we're back to having ozone react, which we already established from choice A was not going to be any good either. So choice B must be the answer to number 84. 673, number 85. Salt deposits and moisture threaten to destroy the Mohenjo-Daro excavation in Pakistan, the site of an ancient civilization that flourished at the same time as the civilizations in the Nile Delta and the river valleys of the Tigris and Euphrates. Okay, so we have a relative restrictive clause. Remember when we have when we want to say, you know, I want a car that is very safe to drive, we don't put a comma before that. We are restricting, that is a restrictive clause which specifies the particular one out of many that we're talking about. So ancient civilizations, there were a large number of ancient civilizations. We want the ones that flourished at the same time as the civilizations in the Nile Delta and the river valleys, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so no comma before that, and that's true for the three answer choices that start with that. A, B, C, and C, D are split on that issue. And we have an ancient civilization that flourished at the same time as the civilizations. Well, you know, choice A seems okay as written, but there may be a better way to say it. The site of an ancient civilization that had flourished at the same time as had the civilizations in the Nile Delta and the river valleys. Choice B has these past perfect tenses in it. Remember, past perfect is only used when you need to show a time prior to some other time. And while these two are parallel, these ancient civilizations, you know, they're both the Mohenjo-Daro civilization and the Nile Delta and the Tigris and Euphrates, the Mesopotamian civilization. All of these are existing at the same time. They're in the same tense. They're both in the past perfect. The past perfect, though, doesn't need to be prior to something else. I mean, the salt deposits and moisture threaten in the present tense. So all we have to do is put the ancient civilizations in the past tense to make them before this threatening the excavation. Okay? So past perfect, you only need to use past perfect when you're putting it in a time prior to some other past tense. And we don't have some other past tense. So past perfect not needed. Let's see. So choice D or choice B not helpful for that reason. Choice C, ancient civilization that flourished at the same time those had. Well, so we have a past perfect in the second part, which isn't parallel, and we need it to be parallel because we're trying to say that all these civilizations existed at the same time. We would also expect an as that flourished at the same time as those had. Yeah. Also, those is a demonstrative pronoun, and normally demonstrative pronouns like this one, that one, it's. I'm trying to think of what. Well, let's just say that in this particular case, it's not needed in this one, but the past perfect alone is enough to make C wrong. Maybe next time I will briefly present something on demonstrative pronouns. It doesn't look like they come up very often on the GMAT, though. Ancient civilization flourishing at the same time as those did in the Nile Delta. Again, those, we have this demonstrative pronoun. Normally with demonstrative pronouns, you are either actually pointing at things when you are using them, or they've already been mentioned, in context. You can use pronouns before their reference in sentences, but demonstrative pronouns, it makes it a little bit stranger. Okay, so anyway, those, and it's also not plural, because then we have flourishing at the same time those did, as opposed to, again, in the sentence as written, we have flourished, at the same time as the civilizations and blah, blah, blah. And then what's missing, it's an ellipsis, is did, another past tense. Choice D has flourishing and did, which are two different verb tenses. So we flourished and did, and again, this is an ellipsis, something that's left off because context makes it clear. But flourishing and did are not parallel, so it's not helpful. And then choice E does the same thing. We have, again, flourishing and were, which is not parallel. And again, it's got our friend, those. Not really our friend because, well, I guess it's our friend because it allows us to eliminate choice E. So choice A, it's correct as written. All right. 673, number 86. The results of the company's cost-cutting measures are evident in its profits, which increased 5% during the first 3 months of this year after it fell over the last 2 years. One thing jumps out at me is the whole underlined portion is talking about profits, which increased. But then later on in the sentence we have profits, when in fact we need profits, they. So any of the answer choices that have it are automatically wrong. Choice A, of course, has it. Choice B also says, which had increased 5% during the first 3 months of this year after it had fallen, and we need profits to be a they. So choice B, we can rule out for that reason. The other issue here is that we basically have a chronology of events. We have the results of the company's cost-cutting measures are evident. And that's in the present tense. Before that, we need the profits to increase 5%. And that we need some kind of past tense. And then we also need to make it clear that before that, that the profits fell over last 2 years. And so we want this chronology to be clear from the answer choices no matter what appears in there. Of course, results are evident, stays in the present tense, but we need the profits to have increased in a past tense, not in a past perfect tense like they do in choice B, had increased. Puts it further in the past than we needed to, and it puts it at the same time as the profits falling over the past 2 years. You don't need the past perfect tense in B. And so then C, profits which have increased, so that's a present perfect, which is a past tense. That brings us up to the present, which have increased 5% during the first 3 months of this year after falling. So after falling makes it clear that it happened after this event here. So we have, event 1, event 2, and event 3. The tenses of C make it clear that they happened in this order. D, with a 5% increase during the first three months of this year after falling. Now, the GMAT really is not a fan of the word with starting a modifying phrase, or we'll just say starting a phrase, or really, yeah, it's a phrase. Sometimes it's clauses too, but with starts a phrase describing circumstances. We've seen, I haven't made a big deal of it so far, but when you have a with phrase, it's not really clear what it's going with. The GMAT prefers that if you're describing the circumstances surrounding a particular event or a particular aspect of the sentence, that it not appear with using the word with, unless you're actually talking about the physical proximity. She came with her brother to visit their mother or something. The actual accompaniment thing. If we're speaking metaphorically of attendant circumstances, the GMAT doesn't like how unclear with can be, because with in this particular case is describing a chronology of events, and so yes, there are these chronological events associated with the results of the cost-cutting measures. The GMAT prefers clearer relationships than with, and we've seen it marked incorrect on a number of answer choices already. So since D and E both have that with there, and with choice E also having the having fallen, remember, be suspicious of being and having, because they're very often parts of very wordy constructions. Not grammatically incorrect. I need to be clear about this. Most of the instances of being and having that are marked incorrect on the GMAT are not grammatically incorrect. They are stylistically undesirable because they are very wordy and kind of paraphrased, kind of talking around an issue way of describing things. And so choice E is one of these having fallen ones. So choice C is our correct answer. All right, second to last question. Page 673, number 87. In an effort to reduce their inventories, Italian vintners have cut prices. Their wines have been priced to sell, and they are. So this is another instance of what I referred to, I think, in the previous one, of ellipsis. Literally a leaving out. It's a Greek word, it means leaving out. Anyway, and it happens often when certain words can be left out of the sentence because they are understood clearly by context. In general, and this is a very frustrating topic for GMAT studiers, because there's times, it seems like most of the time, the GMAT wants you to put the words in there for clarity, but then they go and say in a few questions, oh, well, this is clearly unnecessary, and they want you to leave it out. So, I mean, I guess my general rule of thumb is, when in doubt, leave it in. I think you'll be right more often than not. And there aren't many cases where the sole difference in the answer choice is whether you leave out something or re-include it. And everything else is correct in the answer choice. So when it comes to ellipsis, when in doubt, restate things for the sake of clarity. In your own writing, same thing. The worst that'll happen is that somebody spent an extra 0.2 seconds reading one more word that you wrote. And on the plus side, then it's absolutely clear to them what you meant. Anyway, this is an instance of ellipsis in the underlined portion. Their wines have been priced to sell, and they are. Now, priced. The thing about ellipsis in a case like this is that you are leaving out something that's understood because it's being repeated. Priced to sell, and they are sell, which of course doesn't make sense. It needs to be they are selling. Or, and they, wow. Or they do sell. So we've kind of shifted. I mean, so you would hear somebody say this sentence, something like this, in everyday speech very often, and of course you'd have no trouble understanding what they meant. They are basically, being elliptical and leaving out the word selling because it's close to the word sell. But on the GMAT, that's close to is not the same as exactly the same, and they want you to be as correct as possible. Their wines have been priced to sell, and they are. So we would either needed to say they've priced it to make sure that they are selling, and they are, i.e. selling, or priced to sell, and they do sell. Choice A, not parallel in that way. Choice A, are priced to sell, and they have. It would either need to be priced to be sold, I guess, and they have been. Or what this one is saying is priced to sell, and they have sell, which is not English. So choice B, not parallel. They are priced to sell, and they do sell. That was one of our predictions for what would have been correct. Choice D, are being priced to sell, and have, well, and again, this one we would either be, we would want it to say, we would want it to say have sold. The other thing that's weird about choice D is are being priced to sell and have sold suggests that right now they are pricing them to sell, but they've already sold. So why are they pricing it to sell now if they've already been selling? The verb tense is weird in D. And E, had been priced to sell and they have sold. Again, the verb tenses make it sound like the, well, choice E, had been priced to sell, is we don't need the past perfect. We don't need it to go back that far in the past. We just need the pricing to sell to be recent, and for the selling to be current, not for the pricing to sell to have been ancient history, as is the case with the past perfect, and they have sold, which is the recent past. So choice C, it matched one of our predictions about the correct form of the verb. They have been priced to sell, and they do sell. That's our correct answer. Okay. Last question, 67388. Thelonious Monk, who was a jazz pianist and composer, produced a body of work both rooted in the stride piano tradition of Willie the Lion Smith and Duke Ellington, yet in many ways he stood apart from the mainstream jazz repertory. Okay. So the placement of both and is clearly an issue here. And we have rooted in X and Y as an issue on this one too. Let's talk about what these issues are. The placement of both determines what's being matched. Whatever comes right after both is the, let's use A and B, both A and B. If you have both before rooted, both rooted and some other thing, we're going to expect this to be a verb. Whereas if we say rooted in both, and what do we have here? Tradition in both. And then we have another blank. We're going to expect this also to be a tradition. So the placement of both makes a difference. If it's before the verb, we're expecting a pair of verbs. If it's before a noun, which is the object of the preposition in here, rooted in both X and in Y, or really both A and B. Oh no, really it's that other one. Okay. Anyway, and in both cases, the A and the B, the X and the Y, those two things need to be parallel. And we can see from the question that basically we have the stride piano tradition of Willie the Lion Smith and Duke Ellington. We don't have two separate traditions here. It doesn't say rooted in the stride piano tradition of Willie the Lion Smith and some other kind of tradition of Duke Ellington. What this is saying is that the stride piano tradition is that of both Willie the Lion Smith and Duke Ellington. That is to say, they are both part of that tradition. They are not different. Okay, that would be, I can't even think of a good example. Yeah, I can't think of a good example off the top of my head. So basically, the problem in general is this word both, because both implies that we are having two different things that he's rooted in, or when both is before rooted, we're expecting him to be rooted and some other verb, which is actually clearly not going to happen. But even with a different placement of both, we expect there to be two traditions, the stride piano tradition of Willie the Lion Smith, and some other tradition of Duke Ellington. Instead, we have rooted in both a tradition, stride piano tradition of Willie the Lion Smith, and then a person here, namely Duke Ellington. And that's naughty. We want to have him rooted in two traditions, so probably the word both is not actually going to work for us at all. So the word both appears in choice B also. Both is a big problem here. Actually, and also choice E. Both is in that one too. So that leaves us choices C and D. Thelonious Monk. Oh, sorry, jazz pianist and composer Thelonious Monk. So here we've reversed the sentence structure. We are, instead of having a relative clause saying Thelonious Monk, who was a jazz pianist and composer, we've just put his roles in front of his name, which is, neither one is wrong. It's just another way of constructing the sentence to give you more to read, so you can't just do a vertical scan. Jazz pianist and composer Thelonious Monk, who produced a body of work rooted in the stride piano tradition of Willie the Lion Smith and Duke Ellington, yet in many ways he stood apart from the mainstream jazz repertory. Choice C is missing a verb, because jazz pianist and composer Thelonious Monk, that's the subject, who produced a body of work rooted blah 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 all the way to Duke Ellington. That's a relative clause describing Thelonious Monk, and then we get a coordinating conjunction yet, and coordinating conjunctions, X, yet Y. X and Y are both complete clauses, and we haven't even had a verb yet for X, and we've already moved on to the second one, Y. So choice C, no verb. That's sad. Let's hope that D does better. Jazz pianist and composer Thelonious Monk produced a body of work that was rooted, there's our verb, in the stride piano tradition of Willie the Lion Smith and Duke Ellington, yet in many ways he stood apart from the mainstream jazz repertory. So choice D gives us the verb we were after, correctly describes Thelonious Monk with a few words reduced out of it, and we got rid of that both, which again we certainly, well, I don't know anything about, or I don't know enough about Thelonious Monk to actually tell you any of it, but in theory we could have said that he is rooted in two traditions, or it was inspired by two people. A different sentence could have done that, but the word both with the sentence as constructed was going to be a problem. So that's it. The old clock on the wall says that's all for Grockit's OGTV for today. My name's Jim Jacobson. You've been listening to me talk about sentences today. Next time we are going to pick up on page 670. Whoa, I can't even write the numbers right. 673, number 89. And we will do some more problems. We are well on our way. We're scheduled to finish on Thursday of next week. So at which point all of these should be becoming available online for your review later. In fact, maybe that's how you're listening to it now. Anyway, my name is Jim Jacobson. Thanks for joining me on Grockit's OGTV. We will see you next time for some more sentence correction.